Isolation day 45, Saturday the 2nd of May. I hope you're all well and you're looking after yourselves. I thought I'd take a different tack today because I have been diabetic now for 35 years. It was my diaversary, as it's called. I didn't know that term until relatively recently. The fact that I'm more active on social media, I have learnt some new terms such as diaversity, such as diabuddy, stuff like that. As I say, I've now been diabetic for 35 years, although I'm not entirely sure if it was the 1st or the 2nd of May. My family was so traumatised by the whole episode. I know it was in the first couple of days of May, but we're not entirely sure when. So, 35 years. What changes have I been through in 35 years? I was actually invited to be on Daniel Newman's The Talking Type 1 podcast, and that was on the 1st of May. We recorded that. So Daniel was asking me about this, and I thought I would spend some time tonight and explain some of the changes that have happened over the years to me. Diagnosed 1985, went to the hospital very, very ill, spent 7 days in the hospital. The nurses were amazing and they taught me how to use a syringe, they taught me about blood sugars, they taught me about different ways of testing your blood. So if I go through those, the first thing they taught me was that they gave me the injections generally in my arm, but they would teach you to rotate the sites, because otherwise they explained to you that you would get lumps and you would be uncomfortable. So I understood that. I used the little cards that they gave me, and I know some people still do use the cards. I don't use them now because I'm on a pump, but even so, they would get the syringe ready, they would get the vial of insulin, and they would give me an alcohol swab. You would put some air into the syringe, inject that into the vial, pull the insulin through. You would flick the syringe to ensure that any air bubbles, and they made this very clear, there cannot be any air bubbles in your insulin, that would push to the top, and then you'd push them back out into the bottle. So you'd have a syringe with insulin in it. The gauge would be however many units you want, and you would just do it by eye. Now it's a lot more accurate for obvious reasons. So that you would clean the area with an alcohol swab, so you'd rub your arm or your leg, and then you would inject yourself. So within a week I was injecting myself. Not all the time, my mum would do it as well, but mostly we were able to, the nurses taught me how to do it. They also gave me what I think has been probably one of the most harrowing, one of the worst bits of kit that they've ever invented for people with diabetes, which is this, which I've mentioned before. And I call it the guillotine, because you have to press the button on top and the needle shoots down into your finger. And for an 8-year-old with not very fat fingers, you would shoot it into your finger, and it would rebound off the bone. Basically, it was so painful and so uncomfortable, and I did that for an awful long time. But they taught you how to do that, and then urine testing strips. So you would have to wee on a strip, and you would have a look at which colour the strip turned to, and that would tell you what your blood glucose was. So of course I preferred the urine strips as such, and I was sent on my way. And for a number of years, that's how I managed it. I had 2 injections a day, one before school, one before my evening meal, and that lasted me, and that seemed to go okay for a good number of years. A few years passed, I went to secondary school, and for a couple of years I did exactly the same. So injection in the morning, went to school, spent all day at school, came home and took another injection before my evening meal, and that would last me overnight. The only problem with syringes was it was quite restrictive, because you would keep the vial of insulin in the fridge because that was the guidance. You would have the syringes at home. You wouldn't carry them around with you anywhere just in case you broke them or they got misplaced. And then things changed and Nova pens were introduced. So these were the pens that I used. And initially I only used one of the pens. Instead of having 2 injections a day, I had 4 injections a day. But you would load up the pen with a vial of insulin. You would twist it, and that would tell you how much insulin you were taking, and then you press it in and it would click down and give you the insulin. My only concern with that was one of the pens I really didn't like because you couldn't see the insulin actually going in. With the others, you could see the gauge at the back just pushing down, and I preferred that because I knew I was actually getting the insulin. At the time was a big game changer because it meant you weren't restricted. It meant you could take you were having 4 injections a day, and you could have the insulin with you, the pen with you at any time. So I used to have a number of pens, one in the school bag, one in my school blazer, couple at home, that kind of thing. And for me, that was a real big game changer. A lot more freedom and much more convenient. Alongside that, they finally introduced a device to take your blood out of your finger. They introduced a soft click, and you could actually dial it up how deep it went into your finger, and that for me was amazing because it no longer hurt. I was able to take my bloods when I wanted to as well, and I stayed like that for many years. Pens alongside the blood testing. I went to secondary school in 91. The Nova pens were probably 1993. Now the next big change was after the year of 2000. So in 2000, long-acting insulin, Lantus, was introduced in the US. And generally what happens is stuff's introduced in the US, they test it, they have it there for a few years, and then it comes over to the UK, a lot like the insulin pumps now. Long-acting insulin was introduced over there, and long-acting insulin was insulin that they told you would last 24 hours. You would take the insulin, and this was how it was a game changer, because you would take the insulin, that would cover you for all of your background time. And then what they explained to me at the time is Humalog is short-acting insulin. So I had Lantus and Humalog. And Lantus was the long-acting, Humalog was the short-acting. I had them in 2 pens. And the beauty of that was you could take as many injections as you wanted of the Humalog. So if you wanted to eat 5 times a day, you could take 5 lots of insulin. So you would take the insulin for the food. That had never happened before to me. So I took the same amount of insulin at the same time, and I kind of managed around that. But this was a bit of a game changer. So I found I was eating more or eating less, and I was able to manage it. So that was probably 2003, 2004. I didn't change until 2015-16 when I got the pump. So that was over a decade of having those pens on me at all times. And I quite like the pens. I like the way it worked. It worked quite well for me. I was against, and I knew about insulin pumps, only in so much as I dismissed it. I dismissed an insulin pump because I always thought, and yeah, people with pumps, and I've got a pump now, so I'm going to say it, I thought it was like a colostomy bag. And I thought, not it was like a colostomy bag, but I thought, why would I restrict myself to being tied to something at all times? With the pen, it's so convenient. It's not with me at all times. I can take it when I want to. I'm pretty normal without it. That was my concern about an insulin pump. That was why when my blood sugars were on the roller coaster and I was struggling so much, and I did some further research into insulin pump and what they did and how they did it. And the beauty of an insulin pump is that the amount of insulin it can give is so much more accurate. Therefore, you can be so much more accurate with your analysis and your checking of your blood sugars. With the pens, at times you might get half a unit more, half a unit less. Depending on how hard you press the button in. I never really trusted you were getting exactly the same amount of insulin every time. And so that's the benefit of the pumps, and I was the one that was begging for an insulin pump because I thought it would change everything, and it does. Don't get me wrong, it really does. Do I like the fact that I'm tied to it? Do I like the fact that it's strapped to me? Not particularly. If I had the choice, I would go for something that wasn't strapped to me. But then again, it needs must. Just get on with it and stop complaining, really. It could be a lot worse, couldn't it? Let's be honest. The next change was the CGM. So I got the insulin pump. I finally got the insulin pump. And then I found out much more information about the continual blood glucose monitoring. And that, I think, alongside all of those changes over the years, I think that is the most successful thing that has ever been produced. Because, and I've mentioned it before, that I was in a Zoom call. I'm actually on the Zoom call in an hour's time. I was in a Zoom call with a lot of guys from the US, and all of us, every single one of us, agreed that the CGM, that we wouldn't live without the CGM. So for those of you that are listening to this and you haven't got a pump and you haven't got a CGM, even if you look at Dexcom, Dexcom, you put it in your arm, you don't have to take you don't have to test your blood that often. And that's the beauty of that. At the moment, I'm still calibrating 2 or 3 times a day, so I'm testing my blood with the Medtronic pump. With the Dexcom, you don't even have to do that. So things are changing so quickly at the moment. We are in an amazing time to be diabetic. We've got the tools available to us that 35 years ago we couldn't even dream about. Peeing on a stick to giving insulin automatically because your body will tell it, and the CGM will tell it what you need. Worlds apart. So that's what I wanted to give you, just a bit of an overview. Yes, it's my 35th anniversary of being diabetic. Am I happy about it? Not particularly. Am I encouraged by the future? 100%. So look after yourselves, okay? And as I say, if you haven't considered a CGM or a Dexcom or a pump, I would really strongly suggest you do so. And I know lots of people that are on the Dexcom plus the multiple daily injections, and they seem to really work well with that as well. So I'm not suggesting you do a pump, but I do think the CGM is a million miles ahead of anything else. So look after yourselves, take it easy, bye.